I am so excited for our guest to be joining for this episode of the Continue Change podcast series. Today, we are going to be speaking with someone who I've really grown to love over the last couple of months. And we're going to be unpacking the fact that we have a lot of virtual events right now, and we're not necessarily aware of what's going to happen next with all these events that we've created. But before we get into that, Sarah, tell us, who are you? What do you do? How do you connect with the nonprofit space?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Sarah Milestone. I run a small consulting firm out of Madison, Wisconsin. Sort of using my last name, it's Milestone Consulting and Special Events. And I advise nonprofits in the fundraising world to sort of work at strategy and work at planning for mostly major gifts. Oftentimes that sort of rolls into a broader fundraising area. And then I also work on special events and advise companies and nonprofits in that way. Most of my career, most of my experience is based in New York, doing big events there. And I just happen to be from the Midwest and here. So
love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, likewise, all the way from New York to the Midwest, a very different area. So I think one of the places that I was imagining we could begin to unpack here today, Sarah, COVID hit, the coronavirus hit, and it felt like nonprofits everywhere just started doing virtual events.
Right.
Did you see that unfold? What did it look like from your perspective? Were those events well thought out, sometimes well thought out, all of the above?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is one, frankly, one of the most interesting things about this time period is that everything that we've planned, everything that we've known is kind of been abandoned, right? Immediately. I mean, I think that if you were watching the science, if you were paying attention, you sort of saw things coming. But really, I mean, all of the budgets and all of the planning that impacts this year was done last year, and there's no way to have predicted what this would do. So a lot of people went into kind of, emergency mode and tried to kind of take their goals and layer them on top of a new format and work with, across the board, but especially with events, to look at, we were going to make this much in a gala, and we can't do that now. We can't have people gathering, so we'll switch it to an online format. And I think, a lot of that is just sort of trial and error. I think that one of the things that's come out of the experimentation is the value in media and actually reaching people in their homes, reaching people where they are, expanding an organization's audience. So
getting into the living room, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, it's funny because what started out as like an emergency plan, backup plan for fundraising events has sort of woven its way back into a really sort of more general programming need for an organization to just to be constantly communicating and sharing, what their value is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of, I mean, really just trying to take like the square peg and jam it in the round hole.
Yeah.
Like we didn't see it. Yeah.
This has to go somewhere. I'm going to make it go here.
Yeah.
So, I love the creativity. I know you and I have talked about some of the creative approaches that people have taken because of that emergency mode, stepping even maybe back before COVID hit. In the last 5 or 10 years, have you seen, as someone who's working with some of these really large events for nonprofits, have you seen that space shifting already? And did this accelerate it, or was this really a totally new world?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think I think also the other layer, so we're talking about COVID, but the other thing that's happened is that COVID has exposed some other great inequity in our world.
Yeah.
And I think that is the question that a lot of organizations were sort of grappling with, not in the way that we've all been sort of broken open and are really looking at like restructuring organizations and restructuring so many things, right? And I think that people were always, especially, I do, I work with a lot of different organizations, and especially in the arts, it's very, it's challenging because it can be seen as elitist, and we're working a lot to try to make it accessible and to bring. And so there's always this tension, right? And so yes, I think people were trying to, build the next generation of audience members, build, on the stories and the collections. And so, yeah, for sure, all of this has accelerated that.
Do you think was there a lot of virtual happening before this? Were events operating both offline and online? Or was this really new to a lot of organizations, the idea of live Facebook, Zoom, etc.?
So I think a lot of it is a new medium, for sure. I know I worked with the Whitney Museum in New York, and in maybe the mid 2000s for a big event, we had an outside event or an outside web firm design an online auction format for us.
Cool.
And so, I mean, you just plug into those now online. And I think how funny that is in, a relatively short amount of time. Like we went from we had to craft it. We had to troubleshoot all of the transitions. And now it's sort of, to do an online auction is easy. You just pick.
Yeah, you just click pick
the software, upload the pictures, and you've got it. But I think I think for events, even in-person events, you're always doing, as you would know, right? Like you're always doing some sort of digital or, feed in. You're honoring someone who's on the other side of the country, and you do like a feed into them, or do some sort of video. So I think that when you're telling stories, that's certainly part of it.
For a museum, so I know, Sarah, we've talked a lot about how you have a diverse array of work, but that you've done quite a bit with museums specifically. What are some of the unique virtual event ideas that you've seen them run with? Because it's not just a copy and paste kind of space. It's more complex, isn't it?
Well, that's right. And I think that what's really important. I mean, so I have my favorites. I have my, let's call them some quirky favorites. But I think that like anything, it's really important for an organization to stay on mission and to stay on point, and to let the impact, let the significance, let the community kind of be a part of how you're changing directions and changing gear. Let's see. I don't know. I like the Frick does cocktails with a curator. I think that's great. It speaks it speaks to their collection. It speaks to, sort of their culture in a lot of ways. And it has been, it has like a timely, pandemic tie-in.
Right, we need a cocktail right now.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, maybe a couple. What is that? I'm curious. What does that look like? Do I Zoom call while drinking, or?
Yes, so they'll send out. One of their curators will sort of do an in-depth look at one of the pieces in their collection. It's recorded from this curator's home. And then they send out a cocktail that sort of ties to, I think the first one was a Manhattan or something. So it's, very much like it helps to, I don't know.
That's so unique.
And that is not an event. So that's there's no barrier to getting that. I think it's YouTube. I think, anyone can watch it. You don't have to be a member. You don't, it's not a ticketed thing. And let's see, what else? I mean, I really, this is an opportunity to get some, I other organizations that are sort of, because we're all communicating with photos and images on social media now, looking at what, a self-portrait looks like, or what, like just some timely topics that are available. There's behind the scenes tours and access is always interesting and special. And so, I think there are ways to do that. The feeding of the animals.
Yeah. I love that the feeding of the animals, what I love is that it really kind of like integrates the online world with the virtual world.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting pieces of art I saw last year was a concept that kind of showed how we're living in both places at the same time. And I feel like that's never been more true than it is now.
Yeah.
What sort of fascinating examples have you seen in your space with both a virtual and an offline component? Maybe it's getting in the mail or physically touching something somehow.
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of like the big galas that changed. I think one of the first, there were some organizations that were, that would sort of call everyone together for a big Zoom call, and then you sort of move your table, what would be your table, to a side chat with your sort of 10 people. And then, the organization was delivering a bouquet of flowers or a bottle of wine or something to, correlate so that there was a sense of unity across the board. And I think, as we've kind of matured out of even just the last 2 months, I think that there's a great cost in that. In sort of tying that in. And so figuring out, and actually, as we've all learned so much out of the last 2 months. So like having conversations with your key donors is always, the most important thing, and to find out what people are interested in, having more access to visually and online, and what they need out of an in-person, or what they're missing, and trying to sort of fill that void.
I love this idea of moving from just an event where we attended to something that's creating more of a sense of unity.
Yep.
Talk to me about what you envision that looking like for all of these nonprofits who have, out of necessity, pivoted to a virtual format. How do we move forward? What does this look like, and how can we build a community as we progress?
Well, I think we heard a lot about it sort of as it was happening, and as people were sort of trying to make sense of the sea change. There was a lot of collaboration. There was a lot of communication between different organizations, different teams doing similar things to figure out, how do we pool our resources? What's the greatest need? And I think that is, I think it's a good practice. As someone who cares about the arts in general, I think that, the more voices, the more people you have around the table, the more likely you are to come to the right conclusion.
Right.
So I think that this collaboration, and I think, we don't know how we'll emerge, but I think really taking some time to figure out what are the real problems that each community is trying and needing to address, and how do we, as people that are concerned and invested in that, how do different people, what do they bring to the table? So I do think that these sort of partnerships, I do think a real conversation around need and assets of what people, bring to solve different problems.
Sarah,
and there might be,
how has this changed how you even personally uh, are building a sense of unity with potential donors or clients. How has this changed how you personally even approach partnerships?
Sure. So it's tricky, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
I definitely always have the creative problem solver hat on. You know, I mean, it is. I'm comfortable in that sort of ambiguity and comfortable kind of asking the questions and seeing what bubbles up. But there's always, I mean, it's not as obvious, right? Like the answers are not as obvious as they once were.
No.
So there's a big middle, and it's a lot of
big middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a big middle, both on the personal and the organizational side, where the answers are not as obvious as they once were. I'm wondering too, how does this impact the way an organization is going to structure its staff if we switch to, if this becomes a more permanent part of our plan, how does that impact nonprofits?
Right. Well, I think I mean that's a real question, because so many places are open, and even when states, say technically are open for museums, there are some museums that are saying we're not going to open.
Yeah.
So it's, I think all of this kind of reopening is political and sort of personal choice in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot. I think that there are different phases, right? So this is we're still getting our bearings. We're still just in that emergency state. I think then for another year and a half too, until people are really comfortable being around other people, I think there will be a lingering kind of let's call it trauma that that will affect people's decisions or comfort level in going into a big space. And that's sort of why I think it's really important, as we've been talking, maybe not here, but previously, about, how do you move people? So even because of that trauma, because of that, like being uncomfortable, how do you serve both purposes? Where you've got the resources, you've got the connection available online, but then you also have a social distanced something.
Right. It's really an opportunity for us to better serve the communities that we're trying to impact as a nonprofit organization. But along with that opportunity is the inevitable complexity of, now I have two versions of everything to manage. I have an offline and an online, and how in the world do I do that?
That's right. Well, and your question about staffing is always is a general resources question too, and it's a budget question. And those to do two separate things that where you used to do only one is obviously more expensive. And there are ways to take the video that you put together for the online presentation, to take that to a broader audience, to sort of push that out to your email list or something. There are ways, once you have the content designed and created, you can use it in different ways. But again, that goes back to planning, right? So that if you're not thinking about all of that from the beginning, you may not be setting yourself up to execute at the end.
Yeah. If you don't start with the end in mind, then you won't get as much out of your virtual event as you would have. I know we were talking about the Austin museums, I believe, right? And how they were making a pretty big leap in this way. Tell me more about that. I was so curious to see that happening.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great story of the museum not wanting to let people go, and realizing that their sort of business as usual had stopped immediately. So they took all of the back burner projects. So all like the not priority, but all of the things that they wanted to do, like rewrite wall text or update a social media presence, and they kind of de-siloed all of the staff that was there, and they discovered maybe there's a security guard that has a great social media following, or there's someone in their legal department who wants to, is an art historian and wants to, write wall text. And so they just said, we're investing, we want to keep our resources, we want to keep our great people. We can't do the jobs that everyone's been like sort of hired to do. But we have all of these projects that will benefit us in the long run. Like these are these are ultimate goals of ours. So while we can't do the primary goals, we can like invest in some secondary things that will support. So, I think that's,
that.
Yeah.
Really, they reimagined their whole, the way that they were deploying and utilizing their resources as a team.
Yeah.
I love what you said when you said, maybe there's a security guard that has an amazing social media talent, just completely allowing their staff and their roles in their org chart to kind of temporarily blow up in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's a little bit of an extension of what we're all seeing on these Zoom calls in everyone's home, right? Like you're seeing the full person show up at work. You're not seeing just just when they clock in and when they clock out. So,
So you could make the argument then that this is a chance to really see the full person across the table, instead of just you're in this role and this is what you do and this is how I know you, and instead to kind of back up and go, no, let's look at what else this person brings to the table. They're part of the team, but that doesn't mean that they have to be swinging the hammer. Maybe they're actually really good with a saw too.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Have there been ways that you have surprised yourself even with talents or skills that you didn't know you had as a marketer?
So showing up for this, maybe.
Fair enough.
Like saying, sure, let's talk. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something. I mean, honestly, just embracing like whatever comes, not whatever, but the newness, and embracing sort of the uncertainty or the why not try it?
Yeah.
Of all of it. I mean, let's see. I think part of it is being, having a small firm, being self-employed. It is, I've done a lot of building relationships, right? So it's sort of like a project that I may not be in another time. I might have been paid to serve a certain role. I'm not, but I want to still make sure that my people connect. And I still want to make sure that that good work is getting done. So showing up in a more pro bono kind of way.
Yeah. Being willing to say yes and.
Yeah.
I know for me that's been meaningful too. In one regard, I think this time period in our lives has allowed us to basically cut off some of the excess that wasn't bringing life. Right. But I also think that it's exposing new opportunities for life, and both in our personal lives and also for these organizations that are reimagining their staff's talents, reimagining their priorities, reimagining how to tell these stories. One of my favorite things that I have seen is all of the little creative ways that people are actually creating these communities, if you will, in a virtual format. And I want you, before we let you go back to your day job, if you will, I want you to tell us a little bit about what you did, because I think it's pretty neat.
Wait, what about what I did?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna, in what context?
I think you invited me to a special little.
Oh, sure. Oh, of course. Of course.
Uh-huh.
That's right. So I did, yes, in fact, I should probably build on some momentum that started with it. But I am a fan of Slack, and I use it and have sort of implemented it with a couple of different clients now.
And just pause right there for those who don't know, what in the world is Slack?
Oh, sure. So it is it's a co-working, collaborating platform.
Mm-hmm.
It often takes the place of email in terms of inter-office communication. But what is great is that it's great for a number of reasons, but you ultimately leave a paper trail, really. So, you know, as a consultant, I pop into a project, I can pop out, and all of my files and all of my conversations are there. And one just builds on those and can reference kind of the archives in a really easy way. But so I realized that there were a lot of people with shared experience, right? So mine is in the arts and art museums and in special events. And I reached out to some colleagues and I said, I'm putting this format together, putting together a Slack channel so that we can all communicate and be available to sort of bounce ideas off of each other, share resources. You know, I think I know that I miss just sort of, you know, like nudging, so physically touching, that's not happening, right? Nudging someone and saying like, hey, what do you think about this idea? Or how much would you pay to do this experience? Or, you know, just kind of getting that anecdotal feedback and from trusted colleagues. And so I put this group together as a way to bridge that gap and to be a resource for people as we try to make sense of what's happening and get a sense of what is happening around the country. I think it's very clear, right? Especially New York is opening at a different pace and for a different reason than, say, you know, Chicago or Madison or Holland, Michigan. And so, you know, there are it's very local how things are happening, but there are these trends and we can learn from our colleagues across the way. So
yeah. And I picked on you a little bit because I feel like so often, and it can be therapeutic even, so often though our discussion around, you know, virtual events, communities, and this shift, it can feel almost intangible. And what I loved about your Slack idea is that it feels so tangible. And I think that you really put yourself out there and kind of experimented. And I can't wait to see where it goes. I think the audience can take a page out of your book.
Oh, right.
I hope that they do.
Yeah. Really well, and if they'd like to join, they should DM you or me, we can get them on there.
They should DM you, and then they can get invited to your Slack, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, Sarah, it has been such a joy to get to know you over the last couple of months. And today I'm so grateful for your time as you've helped us kind of unpack this conversation and been a little bit vulnerable in the process. Before we let you go, I'm eager to know, are there any shameless plugs that you want to share? Where can we find you on the internet?
Besides sure.
Slack?
sarahmilestone.com.
I love it.
Yeah,
pretty easy to remember.
Very simple.
Easy peasy.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And for all of our listeners, thanks for joining. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode. We'll make sure to have some of the things in the show notes here that Sarah and I discussed today. And we hope you join us for the next episode of our Continue Change series.
Great. Thanks so much.